I have made the files used in this class available for free download. Link is in the description of this video. Feel free to grab the files so that you can follow along, and the class is starting in just a few seconds. Just bear with us as we admit a few more members. So I've shared all the workbooks with you. I believe you have them open. You've gone through all the files, and what you expect out of this class is everything to do with the problems that we did provide in those workbooks. Those are the ones that we are going to solve in this class. So that brings us to the end of the presentation that I had. Now I can actually open the workbooks so that we can start this one off. So the if function, like we did mention, is one of the most popular and used functions in Excel. Of course, you can write if statements to test several conditions or even one single condition. In this class, we are going to learn the syntax and the common usages of Excel as a logical function, and then we take a closer look at the formula examples that, of course, you will find helpful. And this is something that is suitable for both beginners and experienced users. Of course, if you have never used the if function before, don't get intimidated. I'm going to walk you through from zero, and by the end of the class, you'll be able to write complex if statements in your worksheets. So this is the screenshot that I took for the if function, and it only requires that you supply 3 arguments. But among the 3 arguments, the 2 arguments are optional. It's only 1 argument that is mandatory. So you are supposed to provide the logical test, and this is just the condition to test. This can either evaluate to true or false, and you can test more than 1 conditions. So you're also supposed to provide value if true. This is optional. And how do you identify in Excel that an argument is optional? You see this argument right here, value if true. You can see the entire argument is in square brackets. Maybe I can turn on my cursor highlighter so that you can see exactly where I am pointing. So you can see that this argument is in square brackets. That means the argument is optional. So every time you're working in your worksheets and you find out that there is a function that you have opened and it has an argument that is in square brackets, just to know that that argument is optional. So let us look at the common comparison operators that you will actually be using as you write your if statements. So we have the equals to, we have the not equal operator, we have the greater than, we have the less than, we have the greater than or equal. Of course, we don't have this one on our keyboard, but we can combine this symbol right here, the greater than symbol, with the equal sign to form the greater than or equal to operator. Let us try out some logical tests. So we have text values and number values right here in the first column and this second column. We are just going to ask, are these 2 values the same? You would actually come into this cell and say equals. Of course, any function in Excel starts with an equal sign, and then you point to this cell and ask, is that value that is sitting in W8 equal to this value that is sitting in Y8? If I hit enter key right now on the keyboard, I will get a Boolean result. The false all are true. So if it was really the same, we would get a true in here. So I will change this value to class 1. You see, we get a true in here because these values are right now the same. But if this one becomes class 2, we get a false in here. So what we have just done is a logical test. We tried to test if these 2 values are the same. So I can drag this formula to the rest of the cells and test all these other values, and then we can evaluate their results. So we are getting a true for this one. Of course, that is very correct. And this one right here, we are getting a false. Why? Because we did ask, is 40 equal to 50? No. That's why we get a false in here. And that's what a logical test means. So now, how do we combine these logical tests into our if function so that we can now have the flexibility to actually dictate what the function should return. Of course, by default, it will always give us false or true. But sometimes you may want to return any other thing, and you can use the if function to do that. Okay? So what are these true and false mean? And the way how Excel understands some of these
people are
things.
putting up their arms, are they allowed to ask, or you give a
Yes, I think you can tell us who is putting their hand up, because I can't see them. I can't see the question. Maybe let me actually come back to, maybe we can check the questions. So which question do you refer to? Okay, so the guy went on mute. So let us proceed. So I was saying that true and false are Boolean data types. And the way how Excel understands this one in its brain is that whenever you run or you test a condition and you get a true, of course with your eyes you will see a true, but Excel sees a 1. And when your condition evaluates to false, of course for you, you will see a false, but Excel inside its brain, it will look at that value as a 0. So a Boolean expression is an expression that evaluates to a true or a false. And we did mention several times that these are Boolean data types, the trues and the false. So let us first understand the logical errors and the data types that you need to be aware of before you start writing your if statements. We have just looked at some of the logical tests that we can perform, but we are not saying that these are the only logical tests that we can perform. There are a lot of logical tests depending on the situation that you have and the data that you're looking at. So there are several data types in Excel that you can work with, and of course I know you know some of them. If you don't know these data types, we have a beginners class that takes you through all the data types that you can ever work with in Excel. So we are trying to write a logical test here and try to find out, are these two values like we did in here when we were explaining our logical test. We are trying to test, and the reason why we are testing this is to show you that sometimes you need to understand the formatting that you are implementing and the data type. So you can see this is a text data format, and this is also text, but these values are not the same. When we test like we did earlier on, we say, is this value equal to this one? What do we expect as our result? The system tells us false. Do we all agree that these values are not the same, even though they are all of text data type? Yes, they are not the same. So when we drag this formula to the next record, what do we expect? False. However much the data type is a number, but these numbers are not the same. And why are we showing you this is to qualify our rule right here. The rule is that data types should be the same when comparing values with logical test, but the formatting does not have to be the same. So let us drag this formula to the next record. You see, why do we get a true in here? And yet when you look at the values with your eyes, you may think that these values are not the same. But when you actually point to this cell and look in your formula bar, you'll see that this is a 2. Even though this one has a USH attached to this value, if I point to the cell like this and check my formula bar, I will still have a 2 beneath. So what you are seeing right here may not necessarily be what is the underlying value. So that's why you need to always understand the formatting and the data type that you're working with. How about when we drag this function to this other record? This is a 1 in text, this is a text data type, and this is a 1 in a number format. Of course, the logical test says that these are numbers that are not the same. Sorry, these values are not the same. Now let us handle this particular example with the date data type. So let us drag our function 2 to this record. Why are we getting a true? Yet this value right here seems not to look exactly like this, but of course, like I did mention, when you point to the cell beneath, you'll see the value, and we did point to this cell and we saw the value that Excel has in its brain. So even when you point to this date that has 01/10, this is 1st October 2021, and this one is also 1st October 2021, but the way how it is formatted looks a little bit disguising, looks a little bit different from this, but the underlying value is the same. So let us point to the cell and check our formula bar. Yes, we have 1st October 2021, and even though we have this format here, when you point to the formula bar, you will see that we still have the same underlying value. So I'm trying to show you the formatting and the data type that you need to be aware before you start writing the functions. We haven't actually started writing any functions. What we have just written is a logical test. Now, let us also look at the value that we shall get right here. What do we expect? Do we expect a true or a false? I release my mouse. We get a false in here. Why? Because this data right here, this value that you're seeing right here, is of course, it may look to be October 1st, 2021, but again, this one is saved as a text. You can see when you check up right here, we have a single quote. We are just forcing to save this date as a text. So these two values are not the same. This is a normal date, which we always encourage you to always work with. And this is a date that has been saved as text. So these values here may seem to be the same, but because this one is a text and this one is a normal date, that's why we are getting a false in here. So if you have any question, we can check the chat box right now. Could you please share the formula used? We haven't started writing any formula. We're just understanding the data type and the errors that you may bump in if you don't properly understand the data type, as well as we just wrote a logical test just to understand what a logical test is. So those with questions, we are told to use chat. Okay, yes. So mute some. Okay, so I can't see any question right now. Can we have the recorded session? Okay, so the recording will come your way. Okay, so we can proceed. I think we are comfortable. Now let us look at the if used alone, as well as the and or logical function. When you come over to your ribbon right here and you check under the formulas tab, you'll see a function library. And in this functions library, you'll note that by default, Microsoft has created these categories for us. We have the recently used, we have the auto sum, we have the financial functions, we have the logical. So when I click in the drop down, I want to find out if our if function is under this category. And yes, it is. You can see it's right here. And we have so many other logical functions. We have the and right here and the or function. So let us see what the if function does alone in this particular worksheet. Of course, like we did mention, there are three logical functions that are commonly used together, and that is if, or, and. Let us see how each function works on its own before we write a combination of either if and or if or. So we have a basic example right here whereby we have the sales reps, and then we have the sales amount as well as this column that has the results. I'll go ahead and remove all these values. So we'd like to write an if statement in here that will tell us the condition that we are trying to test is this sales amount less than 500? That is the condition that we have been given. We want to check which sales amount is actually less than 500. And this is the small data set that we are going to be working with. Now we are going to write an if statement that will evaluate to either true or a false. So you'll come in here and say equals if this value right here, I'm just now giving the logical test. If you can look at my screen tip right here. This screen tip always guides you on which argument you are supposed to supply. So we are in our logical test argument. We are testing if this value that is sitting in E5, is it less than any value that is sitting in F3. Of course, the reason why I use cell referencing is that they are always dynamic. I'll show you why. And sometimes you have seen people doing this. I say less than 500. So this is called hard coding. It's a method that we don't commonly advise people to use because it's a cause of so many problems to your complex functions. But sometimes if the situation dictates that you do so, please go ahead and do so. But for me, for this start, I will make sure that I use cell references. So I'll say is E5, so I know that everything that is sitting in E5 will be this value. Is it less than 500, like the condition was stating? Okay, that is our logical test. You get? Now, we are supposed to give the value if true. Remember our screen shot where I did show you the two arguments that are always optional. Now I'll put a comma and give my value if true. Of course, I want a yes or no instead of a true or a false. So I will point to the cell that has a yes, but sometimes, like I did mention, some people do the hard coding. So when you're hard coding text inside any function, you open quotes and then you say yes and then close the quotes. That is called hard coding inside the function. So I'll point to the cell that has a yes and then F4 key on the keyboard to make it absolute. If you don't know what I'm saying or what I mean when I say absolute, you need to join the classes so that we can understand all the reference types that we always use in Excel. And that is relative, absolute, and mixed cell referencing. So when I mention some of these things, I know beginners who are joining this class or people who have never used the system may find it strange, but people who have ever touched these systems, you know what I mean when I say absolute. So I've made this cell address absolute.
David, do you have a question? You have raised you could pop your question very fast.
Okay. So is there anyone with the question as you did
David,
mention?
you have raised your arm. Can you say your question, please?
I think he's okay. I think he's not able to he's just raising the hand, I think, by mistake. Sometimes it happens. Okay, so let us go back to our workbook. We were still writing our if statement, and we are providing value if false. If this condition is not met, what do you want me to say? I want you to say no, that this value is not less than 500. So I'll also lock it, make it absolute, F4 key on the keyboard, and then I can close off the if function. So when I hit enter key, what do we expect? Of course, by the look of things, 220,000 is actually less than 500 because that was the condition. That's why we get a yes in here. Let us drag the function to the next record. We get a yes in there. Do we all agree that this should be a yes based on the condition? Yes, of course. If you've written your arguments correctly, you'll always get the correct values. So let us test this third record. We get a yes. 450 is less than 500. Yes, we agree. Let us test 550. Oh, we get a yes. What is happening? Can anyone guess what is happening? Yes, of course, we did actually lock some reference right here. So there is a problem inside our function which we need to rectify. So I'll come back here and say equals. If this value is less than 500, okay, comma, value if true, give us a yes. I lock this one, F4 key on the keyboard. Value if true, give us a no. I lock it on the keyboard. And then I can close off my my function. Let us test what this one gives. Oh yes, we didn't lock our reference, which is supposed to be F3. Let us also fix this one to stop it from moving. So we drag this one to the next record. This one gives us a yes. We drag it to the third record. It gives us a yes. Now when we drag it to this record for diction Kibeti, we are supposed to get a no. Of course, just by using our normal eyes. But let us see what the function tells us. Yes, it gives us a no. And you know the reason why we actually got a yes last time? Let us go back to the function and remove the dollar signs right here, F4 key, 3 times, so that we can make it a relative. So when I drag like this, you can see we get yeses all through. And when you evaluate this function right here, so when I double check this value, you can see it is actually pointing to E9 as well as F7. Other than it should actually be pointing to F3, but because we didn't lock it, that's why it moved relatively to this position. So that's why you need to understand referencing, where you need to apply the locking or the absolute referencing type. So I'll go back to the formula up here and fix this cell address, F4 key, to make it absolute. And when I drag this formula to these other records, you'll see we get a no in here because 550 isn't actually less than the condition that we are testing for. So that's how the if function alone can be used in its basic example. Let us look at the AND function. What does the AND function do? If I say, are these sales values for these periods, Jan and February, all above 500? If one of them does not evaluate to true, then the end result should also be a false, because that's what the AND function dictates, that all of them should evaluate to a true. So let us go ahead and write the AND function alone. I'll say equals AND. I need to test as to whether I think there are people who are locked outside. Let me check. Okay, so we need to write the AND function right here alone and see how it evaluates our conditions. I'll say equals AND. Now the AND function requires that we provide a logical test. Now I can say, is this a value? The condition is above 500. Of course, I lock this one so that I avoid, when I drag the formula, the cell address to move. That's the first logical test that we are testing. I put a comma. Another one, we are saying, is the value for Feb also above 500? I lock this the cell address, and then I close my AND function. So when I hit enter key, what do I expect? I expect either a true or a false. So let's hit enter key on the keyboard. There you go. We get a false. Why do we get a false? Because the AND function dictates that all the tests that you run should evaluate to a true, so that you get a true in here. So let us drag this function to the rest of the cells. Now let us evaluate where we are seeing a true. Let us double check right here. This is 550. Yes, it is above 500. And how about 600? Yes, it is also above 500. So that's why we have a true in here. Key takeaway, whenever you write an AND function, all the tests, even if you're testing 100 conditions, they should all evaluate to a true for you to get a true. That is how the AND function works. Now, how about the OR? If you test for 100 conditions or 10 conditions or 5 conditions, and you get one of the conditions evaluating to a true, the end result will always be a true as well. So you get the difference? Equals OR, and then we are saying, is this a value greater than 500? We lock it. Another logical test that we want to give or to test is this Feb value also greater than 500? Remember, we did open the OR function. So if one of these tests that we are going to make evaluates to a true, we should be getting a true in here. So I close off the all function and hit enter key on the keyboard. We get a true in here. Let us double check if we had the same value. Yes, we had the same value up here, 774,000 greater than 500, but we ended up with a false for the AND function. But for the all function, you can see we are ending up with a true, because once you get one of the tests evaluating to a true, the end result will always be a true for the all function. So this is very important for you to know before you start mixing up the all function inside your if statements. So we can evaluate these other records. Let us double check where we are getting a false. Yes, we are getting a false right here because 450 is not greater than 500, and this value right here, 322,000, is also not greater than 500. So we get a complete false. Reason, there is none of the condition that evaluated to a true. So that's how the if, and all function work independently. So we move on to our worksheet called Basic If 1. I know you also have this worksheet in your workbook, and we have a number of examples right here. So this is where the if function is starting to get complex if you're actually a beginner. But again, let us start simple. We have students right here with their scores, and what we want to test is that anyone who actually gets our pass mark, which is 50, we should print a message in here: pass or fail. So how do we write this kind of if statement? You'd come in here and say equals if this value right here is greater than 50, F4 key on the keyboard to lock it. Value if true, what do you want me to return? Value if true, of course, we want a pass. I will also lock it to avoid the cell address to move when I copy the formula down. Value if false, of course, we want a fail. I also lock it and then close the if function. When I hit enter key on the keyboard, what do we expect? For this guy, we are getting a pass. Is that one anyway correct? We can test because this is a smaller data set. But of course, at the back of your mind, just do that. In the real world, you'll be working with huge data sets that you may not easily go through to test with your eyes. And of course, from the look of things, 80 is greater than 50, so they get a pass. If we drag this function to the rest of the cells, you see, we are able to get passes in here. When you look at the values, yes, that's very correct. And then 45 is not greater than 50, so they don't pass. They fail automatically. And our guy here, Jimmy, also fails. So how can we also do the grading? So this particular example, we can handle either using the if function or the ifs. So I will demonstrate to you both options so that you can pick what is really simple for you. Now, we have our grading structure right here. Yes. And we are saying that anyone who scores 90 to 100 gets an A, 80 to 90 gets a B, 70 to 80 gets a C, 60 to 70 gets a D, and 60 and below gets an F. We are not saying that this is the only grading structure that lives. This is something custom that you can create depending on the grading structure that you have. So we are required to write an if statement in here that will either give us an A, B, C, D, or F, depending on the score of the student. So I'll say equals if this value right here, and remember we need to write one single formula and then you drag it to the rest of the cells. We don't want to write each single formula in each single cell. Experts or advanced users do not write their functions like that. So I'll say in my logical test, if this score right here is greater than, I can say is greater or equals to 90. I can refer to this cell. I lock it. Value if true, we want to return an A. So I will point to A and also lock it up. Now, instead of giving value if false, I'm going to open another if, and this is called nested if. So I'll open another if and still ask another question. Is this score greater or equal to 8? I'm asking another question, meaning that we are writing another logical test. So I lock this one as well. Value if true, give us a B. F4 key on the keyboard. Value if false, I will open another if. I did tell you that this is called nested if. I'll still test based on the same value. Is this value greater or equal to 70? Value if true, give us a C. I lock it as well. Let me also lock my O6. Now, instead of giving my value if false, I'll open another if. I ask another question. Is this score greater or equals to 60? I lock it as well. Value if true, I'm following my screen tip right here. So the argument that I'm supposed to be giving is always bold. So value if true is a D, comma. So what should we do for our last question? So we can say value if false at this time, we should be getting an F, because this is our last argument in the entire if statement that we wrote. So I'll say value if false, give us an F, meaning that this guy does not fall under any of these grading letters. So I will also lock it up, and now we need to close all the if functions that we opened inside our first if. So I like to always close until I see the last black closing bracket. So how many ifs did we open? 1, 2, 3, 4. So we need to also close 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes. So when I hit enter key on the keyboard right now, I get a B. Why? Why should we be getting a B right here? Let us double check in our grading structure, because this guy has 80. Yes, we can see 80. We said for anyone who has 80, between 80 and 90, they get a B. So meaning that our function did work out properly. If you're getting any other value away from B, that means there's a problem that you need to fix in your formula. So let us drag to the next record before we actually assume that the function is right. 75 gives us a C. Let us double check. 70. Okay, anything that is between 70 and 80, yes, this is 75. So our function is right. I can go ahead and drag it to the rest of the cells, and we can see where we had a fail, we are also getting an F for these students. How do we use the ifs? If you have the ifs in your system, you could actually say equals ifs or if s, and for the if s, you only need to give logical tests and value if true. It has no value if false argument, and we shall see the trick that you need to use to make sure that you can cater for the last argument in your ifs. So I'll still go back and say, is this score greater than 90? Value if true, of course an A should be returned. I go ahead and lock this one. Let's also lock this one. We also test, our second logical test will be, is this value greater, we need to put an equals sign, greater or equals to 80. I lock it up. Value if true.
Some questions from the people.
Okay, so can you read out the questions?
Can you read out the questions? No, they are raising their arm, so I suppose you can highlight your question very fast. Hereza is saying, I thought the range should be 80 to 89, 90 to 100, 70 to 79, like that.
The range, that is the grading structure that Hereza would like to use, or is saying that we are writing the function poorly from our side. But of course, we did say that the grading structure is something that you set up on your own. So if your pass mark or anything to do with the grading structure speaks to those values that you did mention, then you have to arrange your grading structure to and align it to the values you did mention. But according to the values that we have here, if you get 90, you also get an A. So even someone who gets a 91 will get an A. Even someone who gets a 100 plus will also get an A. So I don't understand that question clearly, but you can always clarify in the chat box so that we can understand. So do we have any other question, or we can proceed?
What is saying that 90 is falling into B, because B, the upper limit is 90, A, the lower limit is 90 still.
So let me go back to the function so that we can... Oh, where is 90? Where is 90 in the scores here? Oh, we don't have a 90. I thought that there was a score that was 90 and it's given. Come again.
The concern is the upper limit for B, the lower limit for A. Where would someone of 90 be? Is it a B because the upper limit of B, or A because it's the lower limit of A?
Can I elaborate my question?
It is fine.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, now what I was meaning is like this. The upper limit of grade A
is 100.
The upper limit of grade B is 90. And
Yes.
the lower limit of grade A is 90. And our if function is saying that if a person is A and above, should fall to B. And remember, we have another function, another if function saying that 90 and above should fall into A. But here, our 90, we are seeing it in B again. So where should he fall exactly? In B or A?
Can I highlight something?
Yes, who is this? Who is this?
It is below.
Okay.
I think the what they are saying is correct. That is what you have as the grading structure. However, you don't have 90 as a mark in the students' list. So probably you can be able to include maybe 90 in one of the students' grade mark, and then let's see how it behaves. Is it going to fall under?
Oh, yes. Okay, let us change any values. Let us change for Jimmy right here and make it 90 so that we can see what the formula gives us. To Alefias from our colleague. So if this one becomes 90, what should we expect? According to the person who asked this question, what should we expect? Even before we look at the function.
If someone has 90, we should be expecting an A. Then I would also request we include also 60 in our data. Then we see what it gives us.
Okay, so let us first look at the 90. So when I hit enter key on the keyboard, you can see we have an A in here. You see? We have an A in here.
Hello?
So when I actually changed this mark to 90, you can see we have an A in here.
Teacher, could you hear my voice?
Let us change this one to 60. If you've not been given chance to speak, please make sure you are on mute until...
Hello?
So let us change this value to 60 so that we can check what happens. So if you change this one to 60, you can see we get a 0. Let me double check. Do we forget? Yes, we didn't lock. You have to lock this. Let me go back to this one and then lock our Q7. So when we actually punch in 60 right here, you can see we get a D. And that's what is given in our grading structure. Let us change to something that is lower, maybe 30. We get an F, you can see. So the function seems to be working properly. Let us change this one to 200. You can see we get an A. So I really, we shall need to understand the question properly. so that we can answer that gentleman to Alefia's. But from the look of things and the grading structure that we have, our function is delivering to our expectation. And we have interchanged the values right here to double check that. So let us also write the ifs function. I'll say ifs. Of course, I did mention that the ifs function does not have the if false argument in it. So we shall see the trick that we need to use. Please stay on unmute. Sorry, stay on mute if you're not speaking. So we shall also test this mark right here if it is greater or equals to 90. Value if true 1, we want an A. So I will lock all these ones. I need to lock Q4 as well. Our second logical test will be if this mark is greater or equals to 80. Value if true 2 is a B, which I lock. Our third logical test will still go back to the same mark and say greater or equals to 70. We should be getting a C. Our fourth logical test, yes?
So, yes, Mr. Admin.
I'd like to know how to make the locking.
Oh, you press F4 key on the keyboard if you're
Yes,
running Windows operating system.
Say again?
Let us make sure
Yes,
that we
please.
can have a session for the questions.
Yes, please, Mr. Admin.
If we keep asking like this,
Can
I
you-
think time may not.
Are you getting me?
Yeah,
Yes, I'm saying let us all stay
now,
on mute
Brian.
until we get to the question session.
Okay,
Yes,
my point
Brian?
of view is, my question is, are you getting me?
Yes.
Yes, it's Brian. Now, members are, because we're having members who are complaining that the formula is too long, they are not getting formula. Others are commenting that maybe you take us step by step, because others are asking how can we lock, because like me, I'm using Windows 8, and
Yes.
this is Microsoft Office 2010. So it's a little bit confusing, because now like
the
F,
keyboard,
you're telling us
the
to
shortcut,
press
the
like
shortcut
F
on
what
your
you said,
keyboard is
and even
F4
lock.
key. So if you don't use the F4 key to lock, let me actually demonstrate another method that you can use. You can actually press the shift key on the keyboard. You press the shift key and then you locate the dollar sign on your keyboard. For my keyboard, it's actually
that is 4.
On button, yes, on button 4. So I can actually manually put my dollar signs by using that combination. If you don't have the F4 key on your keyboard, you can do that.
Yeah,
but
it's
let
on
us
4.
keep the questions. Let us keep the questions in the chat. We shall go through the entire chat so that we can answer all of them at once, because this will consume a lot of our time. So we are writing the ifs function.
Okay, please.
As an alternative to the if. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so our fourth logical test will be, is this mark greater or equals to 60? The fourth value, if true, will be a D. And of course, we don't have the value if false argument in our ifs function. So what you do, you type a true in here. And then you can now give the value if false for your last argument, which will, in this case, will be an F. I also lock it up and then close off the ifs function. So when I hit enter key on the keyboard, I literally get the same results. So let us drag and see whether the ifs function is also giving us the same values like the nested if. Yes, it does. And that's how you can use the ifs function as an alternative to nesting your ifs. Now this is something that you can work out. I'm leaving it to you for your practice. Just test as to whether the actual cells with the target cells, if this guy met his goal, because he had a target of selling 1 million. He ended up selling 1.2. So did they hit their target? Just write an if statement here that will tell us, that will give us a yes, all, or no in here. I believe from the examples that I did show you, this is something that you can figure out. So let us work out an example whereby you have to test for two conditions within your if. Like you can see, for this particular data set, we are still testing on the same scores, but we also have an attendance requirement. So for someone to pass, they must have attended at least 50%, and they should also, their score should be above 40. So how do we write an if statement that involves these two logical tests so that we can get either a pass or a fail in here? You will come here and say equals if this score is greater than 40, which I will lock F4 key on the keyboard. I did show you, if you want to put those dollar signs that implement the locking, you can use the shift and the F4 key on the keyboard. So there is a key on the keyboard, the numerical key, which is 4. It has a dollar sign on top, so you can always press the shift key as well as that numerical key 4 that has a dollar sign to implement the locking that you're seeing in here. So that is our logical test number 1. Am I still on? Yes. So for this particular example right here, we have two conditions that we are testing against. And I did show you that in most cases, the if function is always combined with either and or. So for this particular scenario, what do you expect that we need to combine with the if function? Of course, I know you have guessed one of what we are going to use. So let us open the and function, because now we have to test for two conditions and all of them must evaluate to a true. That's why we need to open the and function, because this score must be above 40 and the attendance must be above 50. Those are two conditions. So let us first write the and function in here before we bring in our if. I'll say equals and, because we did see what the and function does. Is this a value greater than 40? I lock it. Another logical test is this attendance is this attendance greater than 50%? So let us first close off the and function and see what we get in here. Yes, we get a true. Reason being is that this score is above 40 and the attendance is above 50. Now we can wrap this and function into an if so that this one becomes our logical test. So you'll come over here and say if. So this and function will become your logical test. Now you can start to give the value if true argument. So the value if true argument, we are saying a pass or a fail, which I will also fix and close off the if function. Hit enter key on the keyboard. We get a pass for this guy and we can drag to other cells so that we can evaluate at once. Why are we getting a fail for this guy? The score is above 40 and the attendance is exactly 50. So do we expect a pass for this guy? Of course, the condition said that they should be above 50. If the condition was 50 or above, then that's when we would actually expect a pass in here. This guy here, 94, is above 40, and the attendance is far below 50%, so they also fail right there. Now let us move on to our next example. Of course, we have already worked out examples to do with the if and the ifs, so I will not handle this this column. I'll only show you the alternative of using the VLOOKUP to do the grading. So for the VLOOKUP, you'll come in here and say equals VLOOKUP. Of course, now this is a new function. If you haven't worked with the VLOOKUP, it will look a little bit weird for you, but the lookup value is the average, and the table array is given right here. We are using the same grading structure, and the VLOOKUP function always dictates that your values should be sorted from lowest to highest, like you can see in our grading structure for the VLOOKUP. So when I select this range as my table array argument, which I will fix and give the column index number, which is 2. Of course, I'm rushing through the VLOOKUP because we have a special session for the VLOOKUP. So I'll set 2, and then the range lookup, of course, by default is always approximate for the VLOOKUP. You can even close it up from here, or if you don't do that, you can put the comma and you double click on this option, or you can actually type a true in here and then close off your VLOOKUP. I'll not explain the syntax for the VLOOKUP because we have a session on this. I'm just showing you an alternative that you can also do grading using the VLOOKUP. So we also get a B in here. I can double click to send these values to the rest of the cells. There's a little bit of ranking. We shall not do the ranking in here. Let us just proceed to our next example, number 3, so that we can finish the basic examples and then start on the tricky advanced tips. Now for this one, they are saying these are sales, these are orders, and we are saying that anyone whose total is not over 1,500, we should not include the shipping charge. But for others whose total cost of whatever they are buying from us, if it is actually greater than 1,500, sorry, if it's less than 1,500, they get a 2% shipping cost on top of their total cost. So how do we write such a function? So I'll go ahead and remove all these values so that we can write this function from scratch. Okay. So we shall start with our if function. Sorry, I didn't remove all the values. Okay. Now let us see how we can write an if statement that will give us either 2% on top of the total cost, or will exclude 2% from that particular order. So you'll come in here and say equals if this total cost is greater or equals to 1,500. Let us do hard coding for this particular example. Value if true, what do we want to return? Of course, we can say value if true, give us a 0. Don't actually charge this guy for shipping. Value if false, we would like to have this value into 2%. And then I can close off the function, hit enter key on the keyboard. I get 29 shillings or $29, whatever it is, depending on your currency or your local currency, on top of this value, because this value does not meet our condition, because this is 1,450, and we had said that for anyone whose total cost is greater or equals to 1,500, that's when we should actually exclude the shipping cost of 2%. So let us drag through all these other records and see and check out, for example, this record which is saying a 0. that this guy, we shouldn't charge them for shipping. Why? Because you can see the total cost is actually above 1,500. So that's what the condition dictates. We are not giving them a shipping cost of 2% on top of the total cost. So we can calculate the total cost right here by just summing up these two values, and then this guy will end up paying 1,479, but initially he was supposed to pay 1,450, but because we have applied the 2% shipping cost, that's why the value has grown to this particular value. So we can double click and send this value and this formula to the rest of the cells. For this guy right here, whose value is actually meeting our condition, they still pay the same total cost. So this is how basically you can apply the if function in your real life data. Of course, in class we try to give you scenarios that may relate to your real life data that you have that side. But of course, sometimes we are not perfect. So if you meet a condition that requires you to write such an if statement, this is how you can go about it, and it's really quite easy and basic. Of course, we shall not handle the count if and the sum if. These are not formulas for today. Let us actually work out this particular example and show you how you can actually write a simple if statement in your worksheets and work out a report that looks like this. You start with a small if statement that you may write in your worksheets or in your data, and then end up generating or coming up with a report that looks like this. So what is happening here is we are going to be using the nested if, the ifs, and the VLOOKUP to create our categorizations for the transactions. So what we basically want to do is to say that any transaction whose amount is less than 10,000, we categorize them with this category. We call them small. Then any value or any amount that is greater or equals to 10,000, we categorize them and call them large transactions. Just as an example. But we are not saying that these are the only categorizations that you can have. You can have as many as different categorizations depending on your situation. Then any transaction that we are calling key transactions are all values that are greater or equals to 75. So how do we write an if statement, create the categories, and then come up with a report that looks like this? This is very simple. We shall start with the if function. I'll get rid of these values. Let me get rid of the values first so that we can write all these functions from scratch. Okay, let us start with the if function. So you'd come in here and say equals if this value, of course now we are using a table structure. If this value, that's why you are seeing we are not getting a cell address in here. So we are getting at amount. It's giving us the column header because this is a structured table. So I'll say, is it greater or equals to 75? I'll start from the big numbers going down. Is it greater or equals to 75? I lock it up. Comma. Value if true. Of course we need this word here. This is the categorization that we are creating. This word could be anything in your case. Now, instead of giving value if true, I will open another if, like we did for our grading. And then I'll say, is this a value greater or equals to 10,000? I also lock it up right there. Value if true, of course we want this category right here, which I will also lock. And then if our value does not meet any of these conditions, meaning it falls under this condition, then we should be getting this category right here, which I will also lock. and then I can close off my second if that I did open, as well as the first if that we opened, because you can see we have this if here and this if here, so that's why we need to close twice at the end. And this is how the function looks at the values. So 0 to 9,999 will fall under this category. 10,000 to 74,999 will fall under this category. This is how the function looks at the values or the conditions we are evaluating. So I hit enter key on the keyboard, and there you go. All the values will auto-populate because we are using a table or a structured reference. So let us double check our function. Are we getting correct values? This is large. This is 41,000. Let us double check. Where is 41,000 falling? Yes, of course, it's not. It's not 75,000. It's falling under 10,000 and 75,000. So we said they should get this category right here, which is large. And yes, this is the value that we have right here. Let us evaluate this guy here who has 92,990. Yes, you can see this is greater than 75,000, so they get this category attached to the value. Let us scroll through and see if we have any small category somewhere. Yes, we have this value right here, which is 1,000, and we can all agree that 1,000 falls under, is in between 10,000 and 9,999. So they get this category right here attached to them. So that's how you can write a simple statement, a simple if statement, and then let us see how can we actually come up with this report even before we write these other ifs and the VLOOKUP as an alternative to the if to also create the same category. So you click in this table and then insert a pivot table, because this is a pivot table report. So I'll click in the table, and on the insert ribbon tab, I'll just click on this option which says pivot table. I'll not explain much about the pivot table for now. So I'll put it on the existing worksheet, and let me actually give the specific cell address where I want my report to generate. Let me put it right there and say okay. Yes, I get my pivot table fields pop up, and now I can start building my report. I have a blank canvas right here. You can see pivot table 3. That's the default naming, but I can also customize this table name. So what I will do, I will actually drag the size that we actually categorized, or the categories that we created using the if. You can see the column header that says size in brackets if. I drag it to the rows. You see, we are starting to build our report to replicate what we are seeing here. Now, what I need to do to get my amount, I will actually drag the amount column into the values field. This is a pivot table that we are trying to build, and we have classes regarding pivot tables. So I will not explain all what this means, but I will build something like this. So now we get our amount in here, but you can see we are getting a column header right here which says sum of amount. This is something that you can customize later. So how do we get the percentage? How do we get the percentage calculated inside our pivot table? You will drag the amount column twice into the values field. So I bring it in for the second time, and now I can close my pivot table fields and then start formatting this table so that it looks exactly like this or like this one. So I'll change this column header to category and change this one to amount. Change this one right here to percent. Okay, let me also change this one to total only instead of grand total, and I align it to to the right. Now, to get the format that looks like this, where we have comma separators, I'll just right click the value and come over to the number format. So when this dialog box opens right here, you can go with this, any of these. Let me go with the number format, and then I say use 1000 separator so that I can get this format. When I click OK, you can see it applies to all the records in the pivot. And for the percentage, what I will do is to right mouse click and then summarize or show values as a percentage of grand total. So I pick this option, and there you go. We can see this report generated in just a few seconds, but everything that we see right here started by writing a very simple if statement right here. So I did demonstrate how we can use the ifs. Maybe let me also write this one up. I say equals ifs, and I test, is this value greater or equals to 75,000, which I will lock. Value if true 1, of course we need this categorization. I'll also lock it up. The second one will be, we are testing this amount once again. Is it greater or equals to 10,000? I lock it up once again. Value if true, our second value if true, of course, will be this categorization right here, which I also lock. And now, because the ifs function does not have the value. Hello, am I still on? Is my screen showing? Did I lose the network? I think I have a network problem. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, network issue.
Yeah, his voice is breaking a little. He's out.
Even he's breaking.
I think it was a network problem.
Yeah.
So let us continue. I got a network problem.
Okay.
So let us proceed. Are you able to see my screen, Ra?
But we have missed something there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, we are seeing your screen.
I'm not seeing your screen.
Okay. I think it was an issue to do with the internet.
Yeah,
Is it back right now?
It's back, but
No,
yes,
it's
but
back now.
if you can be slow on you know, on
Yes,
the data,
yes, it's back.
people are actually lost completely. You can go very slow. Your voice is also been breaking. Yeah.
Okay. So let us try to be slow, but of course we are mindful of the time as well. People may want to rush and accomplish other tasks. So we were still writing our ifs function just to demonstrate an alternative to the ifs, to create this kind of categorization that gives us this end result right here, which is a report, a pivot table report. So our logical test 3 is, of course I did mention that the ifs function does not have the value if false argument. So we set true and then give our last value if true. That will be this category right here. So I press F4 key on the keyboard to also lock it up and close off the ifs function. When I hit enter key on the keyboard, you can similarly see that we are getting the same. Hello? Anyone who is still on? Yes, please, you can mute your microphone because we are hearing something in the background. So you can see the ifs function is also delivering the same value, like we actually used the nested if example. We also get the same categorization. Alternatively, we could also use the VLOOKUP. So you come in here and say equals VLOOKUP, and the lookup value this time will be this value. The table array will of course be, I selected this range to work as my table array, which I again lock, and the column index number, or the column that contains our categorization, is column number 2 in our entire lookup array. So I'll put a 2 in here, and the range lookup, I did mention that by default it is approximate, but you can either put a comma and double click on your screen tip right here, or you can type in a true, or if you don't do that, because by default the VLOOKUP is approximate, or the lookup range is approximate, you can close it off from here, and when I hit enter key on the keyboard, I also get the same categorization across all the three functions. So we saw how to create a categorization using the if function, the ifs, and the VLOOKUP to come up with a pivot table report that looks like this one right here. So I'm not speaking a lot about the VLOOKUP and the pivot table because we have special classes coming up for those features. Now let us look at our, oh yes, this is almost similar to what we have covered right here. So I leave this one to you to practice, because these are the same functions that we wrote, and the data set is almost similar, but what is different right here is only that we have added in so many other categorizations. For this particular example, we had only 3: small, large, and key. But for this particular worksheet, we have small, medium, large, and key. But again, it's the same concept, it's the same function, the syntax is still the same that you will follow and work out this example. Let us move on to advanced trick number 1. So I'll get rid of these values so that we can start from scratch. And there are a number of questions that we need to answer right here. There are a number of problems that we need to solve using the if function. So if you can read the data before you actually start writing the functions, is we have products and we have revenue that we actually got from selling these products. So they are asking us to print a specific message which is good for any transaction that is greater than 15,000. So how do we do that? Are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can see the screen.
Okay. So we are supposed to write an if statement right here that prints a message, that prints a text right here that is good for any value, for any revenue that is greater than 15,000. Of course, this is very simple. You'd come in here and say equals if, you say if this value is greater than 15,000, which I will lock F4 key on the keyboard, value if true. Of course, we are interested in printing a good for that particular record, F4 key. Otherwise, if you don't give us a good, give us nothing. So how do we write nothing inside this formula? You open quotes and also close the quotes without putting anything in the middle of the quotes. So by doing that, you are simply telling the function that return nothing. So what we are interested in is printing this message good, and the rest, if they don't meet this condition, we should get nothing. So I close off the if from here. When I hit enter key on the keyboard, I get nothing for this first record, because you can see the value 11,649 is not greater than 15. That's why we get nothing right here. I can double click my fill handle and send this to other records, and then we can double check. We can see for pineapple, yes, 15,033. We are getting a 0 because this is slightly greater than 15,000 with just a few cents, and we are getting our message in here. This one is way above 15,000, and we are getting a good in here. So our if statement is working properly. Now we have another problem right here. They are telling us that we should actually print a message, the same message that we did print right here, but the conditions are anything that is greater than 15,000 and less than 20. So what comes into your mind when you see this kind of problem? You can check in the statements. We are seeing we have an and somewhere, or in our logical tests we have an and somewhere. So revenue that is greater than 15,000 and less than 20. So that signifies, or that gives us sends us signal that we should be nesting another function, another logical function inside our if we are to print this message right here. And that is the AND function. Let us first try the AND function alone and see. We shall say equals AND, is this a value greater than 15,000, which I lock. Another test, is this a value less than 20,000, which I also lock. I can close off the AND function from here. And remember, the AND function dictates that all the tests must evaluate to a true to get a true. So meaning all the conditions that we did test must evaluate to a true to get a message printed for us. So when I hit enter key on the keyboard, I get a false. Now because I don't want to see false in my worksheets, what I will do, I will wrap this AND into an if statement. I open the if, and this entire thing will be our logical test. I'll come at the end and say value if true, give us a good, which I lock. Otherwise, give us nothing. So I'll open and close quotes at the same time, and then I can close off the if function. When I hit enter key on the keyboard, of course I get nothing for this value. Is the function right? Because when I look at 11,649, yes, it is not greater than 15. That means it is actually failing one of the tests. And remember, the AND function says you should pass all the tests. So let us drag this function to the rest of the cells and double check. Yes, we have a good for this particular value, 15,033. It is greater than 15,000 and less than 20. Let us check for other values where we have nothing. Why do we have nothing right here? 7,718. It is not actually greater than 15. It's failing the first condition, and it is not less than 20,000. So both the conditions are failing, and that's why we are getting a zero message in there. Let us test for this one, which is actually 30,000. Why are we getting nothing in here? 30,000 is not less than 15, and it is not less than 20. It's actually above. It is actually above everything right here. And remember, we did write two logical tests, and the AND function requires that both of them must evaluate to a true. That's why we are getting nothing in this particular record. Now we have another problem right here that you may encounter, whereby you're actually testing for this kind of scenario. Revenue that is greater than 15,000 and less than 20,000, like the one that we just implemented right here. We get a good as a message. Then the third one is that if the revenue is greater or equals to 20,000, we get an exceptional. The message should now change to exceptional, and the rest should return the value itself. So how do we write such a function? You'll come in here and say equals if. Let us first handle the AND, the tests that involve the AND. So I'll say if this value is greater than 15,000, another logical test under the AND function is this value less than 20, which I also lock. I'll actually lock H2 as well. F4 key on the keyboard. Now that is the AND. What should we get if these two conditions evaluate to true? Value if true should be a good. So I'll point to this cell and lock it as well. Value if false, I will open another if. I'll say if this value is greater or equals to 20,000, F4 key on the keyboard to lock it. Value if true, we need a message. Exceptional, which I also lock. Value if false, the condition tells us that we should return the value itself. We shouldn't return any other thing. We should actually return the value itself. So what do? You actually point to the value or the cells that contain the values, and then close off the second if that we opened, as well as the first if function that we did open. Hit enter key on the keyboard. We get a value returned for this particular record. Why? Because it has not met all these three conditions up. It actually falls outside, and then that's why we are getting a value returned. Now let us drag it to all these cells and evaluate each record one at a go. Yes, we get a value returned. Why are we getting a good for this one? It is actually greater than 15,000 and less than 20,000. That's why we get a good, and that's what the condition dictates. So we also expect to have exceptional records right here, which we get in here. We can see this is 30,400. It's not under any of these three conditions. Yes, it's actually greater than or equal to 20,000. That's why they are exceptional transactions. Now, this scenario right here is quite simple. This is something that you can write from the examples that we have so far covered. So you'd come in here and say equals if, because we need to test for two conditions. If any of the condition evaluates to true, we need to flag off this transaction. So what I will do, I will actually open the OR function inside my if and ask, is this a value greater or equals to 20? I lock. Or is this a value less or equals to 15,000? I'm using the OR function, and you know the OR function dictates that if one of the conditions that have been tested evaluates to true, the end result is always a true. So I'll close off the OR function. I'm back into the if screen tip. I can now give value if false, sorry, value if true. So value if true, we need to flag off the transaction and make sure we can review that specific transaction, else give us nothing. I close off the if function and hit enter key on the keyboard. So this one gets flagged off. Why? 11,000 is greater. Is it greater or equals to 20? No. But is this one less or equal to 15,000? Yes. So that's why we get this transaction flagged off. So we need to review this one. I will double click and send this one down. We can double check for this particular value. 18,000. Is it greater or equals to 20? No. Is it less or equal to 15,000? No. So both the conditions evaluate to false, and therefore the end result is also a false. That's why we are getting nothing in here. Now, sometimes you may not want to return values, like we did actually return a value in here, or print a message, a specific message in your result cells, and you may want to return a symbol, like it is for this particular example that we are going to handle. But let us first check if we have any questions. Do we have any questions? Please, our volunteer, can you check through and update us? If we have questions, then you can read them out, and then we try to answer. Is our volunteer still on? If it's not on, then I can open the chat box.
I think I can take one and go through.
Yes. Which one is really burning that we can answer right now before we handle this particular example?
I don't think so. I think people are requesting to share the presentation recording through our emails. That's it. I'm not seeing any question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The recording will, of course, come through.
Formula are hard to master. We need some time to practice. Suggestion in formula: can you write the formula before locking?
Of course,
Suggestion.
of yeah? Yes, of course we write the function. We lock the address. We don't lock the function. We don't lock the formula itself. We lock a cell address.
Okay, here is the question. Is it possible to encrypt or lock the if formula I may create on Excel sheet such that no one can edit it while in use or doing any other analysis using the conditions I would have created on the formula?
Yes, of course, definitely. You can implement that one using the inbuilt security features. You can come over to the review tab and protect. You can either protect the entire workbook, you can protect a worksheet, you can protect a range, you can protect a cell address, even if it is only one single cell, and you can even decide to protect areas or cell addresses that only have formulas in them. So that's very possible. We can
Yeah,
always come back and have a class how to do that practically.
yeah.
So do we have other?
Add on that question, can this happen if I'm using Google Sheets? Can I lock the cells not to be
Yes, of
tampered
course.
with?
Even Google Sheets does so.
Yeah.
However much Google Sheets is a very different application, though it's a spreadsheet application. Of course, it's developed of a different language, but of course, it does so. It does protect the addresses from being edited or from being copied or from being changed.
Okay, so
Can we go through all of them? I think we can use this time. Go through all of them, and then we do more 5 examples, and then we can end this one because I don't see the time of working out the VLOOKUP alone. So this could be maybe a proposal if we could have this one in its own separate arrangement. So can you scroll through all the questions?
yeah,
Let me
I'm
also.
going to.
I think I can also stop momentarily so that we can handle the questions. When we exhaust them, then we come back to the workbook.
I think it's important not grading system. The issue here is getting to know the formula. I'm replying to someone who asked about looking.
So I can only see a few messages right here, but
Yeah,
I think because I did go off along the way, but
yeah. I think most of the people went off when you went off because of network.
yes.
Yeah.
So can we proceed if we don't have
Yeah.
questions?
Let's proceed.
I think there's someone who is on unmute. Oh yes, Moviva is saying let us proceed.
Yes, Geoffrey.
Okay, so we have an example here that we need to work out. What they are saying is that we calculate the deviation. If we had a product right here, and this was the actual revenue and the budget revenue that we had, we calculate the deviation. If that deviation turns out to be greater than 10% in both directions, even if it was a negative one or a positive one, that is the condition that we have right here. And I also did show you that you can implement symbols instead of returning the values. So how do we write that kind of if in our Excel? So I'll get rid of these I'll get rid of these values so that we can write it from scratch. So the first thing is to calculate the deviation itself. For that one, you'll say equals this value minus the revenue value, or we could actually say equals this value divided by this one minus 1. So you can see we get negative 9% if I'm actually calculating from the correct cell values. We get negative 9%. Let me also try. If I say equals, I'm trying to calculate the deviation. We have not yet written any if statement. because this one divided by the old value divided by the the actual value divided by the revenue value minus 1. I think this is the correct formula. Anyway, depending on how you want to work out this, you could work it out the other way around. But let us go with this one, and our intention is to make sure that we write an if statement that will actually hide values that are not greater than 10% in both directions, whether it's negative or positive. Let us first drag and see what we get right here. So you can see we have positive 9.97, positive 20, positive 18, negative 2, negative 4, negative 1. So we don't want to see these values right here that do not meet our condition, and we want to wrap this entire thing into an if that we've been writing all from the time we started. So we can see this negative 15. So we want to see this value show up. So how do we write that? You will come in here in your formula and say if the result of this formula that we wrote here is greater than 10%, what do we want returned if value is true? Well, we could actually, because we have two conditions, we could open the OR function and test these two conditions at once, comma. Another logical test is the calculation or the result of this calculation less than negative 10%? I close off the AND function. Sorry, the OR function. Value if true. Of course, we need the result of the calculation itself. Else, give us nothing. I close off the if function and hit enter key on the keyboard. We get nothing in here. Let us drag to the rest of the cells and see if we did write the correct function in here. I'll drag to all these other cells. Okay, so you can see we are getting 20%, 20.42% returned because it meets our condition of greater than 10% in the positive direction, as well as this value meets the condition of greater than 10% in the positive direction, and this one is also returned because it meets the condition of greater than 10% in the negative direction, and the rest of the values have been hidden by the if statement that we wrote. Now, alternatively, sometimes if you don't want to return the values like we did, you could actually use the symbols. I've already picked the symbols and have them in these cell addresses, but to get the symbols you can go to your insert ribbon tab, and we have the symbols icon right here. You can click in the symbols and then look for these symbols and then add them. Because I've already used these symbols, that's why they are appearing here in my recently used symbols. But that's how you locate the symbols. So actually, instead of saying return the result, you could actually point to the symbol itself, and it will be returned for you in here. Do we have questions? Or we can move to this worksheet right here.
Yes, I have a question. I think I can ask you that question at the end of this session, but it's almost the same like actual in the budget set. So I would like to check a few wordings so that it's gonna suit my question. But we can apply or we can deal with it at the end of the session if you don't mind.
Okay, no problem. So you mean is it related to these examples?
Well, it's related to this one, the one for actual and the budget revenue.
Let me check. What is that worksheet? Where is that worksheet?
No, the one that we just finished now.
Oh, yes. The revenue?
No, just both of the revenue. Yeah, it's almost the same like this one. But in my
Oh,
case,
yes.
I will be using like the actual report against the information extracted by me to see. Okay, let me just make an example so
Okay,
that
I
you
think
get.
let us understand your question at the end,
Yeah.
but you can always inbox me and find out.
Well, I just wanted you to probably put in the symbols and we see how the Excel work, how the formula works.
Oh, for the symbols, eh?
Yes.
Okay. So you'd come in here and say equals if. You write the same function like we did. We open the OR function and we know what the OR function does. We all know. So we shall still use our calculation. If the result of this formula is greater than 10%, right? Or if the result of this formula, I'm just pasting the formula because I still have it in my clipboard, is less than minus 10%, I close off the all. Value if true, of course, we point to the symbol. Value if true, we point to the green up pointing arrow or green pointing up symbol, which I lock. Otherwise, excuse me, instead of saying return nothing, we want this symbol right here, which I also lock, and close off the if function and hit enter key on the keyboard. So we get a negative deviation in here, and this is the symbol. You can drag this function to all the cells, and you can see everywhere we have a negative value, we are seeing this down pointing arrow, and everywhere we have a positive value, we are seeing this up pointing arrow. But again, it is showing on values that have been hidden right here. So there's a workaround for that. That's how we can insert the symbols. I can find out how to hide this one later, but let us proceed with other examples. But this is something that you can find out if you want to hide this one. I can give it to you as an assignment. Don't worry, this is something that we can work out. So let us proceed to these examples and see if we still have some time. Do we still have some time left? We have like 15 minutes to go. And we have a number of scenarios to deal with right here. These are a little bit advanced, and I believe from the first example that we did handle, that's why we started like this, so that we can build you. So when we actually handle these difficult examples or advanced problems, then you are able to follow along. So the first one is very simple. We only want to test only one of the condition. If it evaluates to a true, then we include these guys in our program. Remember, I had shared this data set before, but we can still go through it and understand. So this is human resource data. We have the names, we have the gender, we have the department of these guys, we have the date they joined, and the salary that they earn. So one of the conditions that, or one of the problems that we need to deal with is we want to include them on one of our programs. We want to include them either on people who will earn a bonus or anything. So how do we write an if statement or an if function that actually tells us that this guy qualifies to be included? And the conditions are given: either male or salary that is less than 85,000. I think this is very easy to write. For those who have been on this class from the time we started, I believe this is something that you can write. So let me go to that particular. I want to get rid of any values if they are there, so that we can write it from scratch. So you'd come in here and say equals if, if the gender for this guy, for this lady Sarah, if the gender equals to male, so how do we actually include our text values inside our formulas? We open the quotes. So if this one equals to male, because that is the condition, but of course from the look of things we can see Sarah is not meeting this condition because she's a female. But let us proceed with our function. If is equal to male, value if true. Oh, but again we are missing something, because these are two conditions that we need to test. Either we need to open the AND function or the OR function. We can't use the if alone. So I'll get rid of this and open the OR function, and then point to my gender, which I'll say, does it equal to male? All is the salary that this guy earns less than 85,000. This time let us do hard coding. Is it less than 85,000? Those are the conditions that we are testing, and we are saying if one of the conditions evaluate to a true, then we should include this guy on our program. So I close off the OR function and then give the value if true. Of course we should include this guy if they meet the condition. I lock it. Otherwise we should, let us say, return nothing instead of putting the word exclude. So I close off this, hit enter key on the keyboard. You can see this guy is included, or this particular staff member is included, and we can evaluate, is the function giving us the correct result? We can double check, is this a male? No, she's a female. Is the salary that she's getting less than 85? Yes. I did tell you that the function or Excel looks at the true or false as numbers, true 1 and false as a 0. So if we are testing these two conditions, I can put here the gender and the salary. So for example, when we tested the gender, this lady didn't meet the condition, meaning got a 0. And for the salary, actually met the condition, that means got a 1. Because this one we assume it was a false, and a false we said Excel looks at it as a 0 in its brain, and a true it looks at it as a 1. So when you look at the number of falses or truths that this person got, only came out with 1 true, and the OR function dictates that if you get one of the conditions evaluating to a true, the end result will always be true. That's why she's included, simply because she's meeting one of the conditions. So I can drag this one to the rest of the cells and see, hey, yes, this guy is not included. Why? She is a female and the salary is way above 85,000. So that's why it's only one guy or one staff member that has been excluded. Okay, now we have another condition or a problem that we need to solve, and this one says check from our staff list anyone who is actually under the website as a department. This could be anything on your side, could be any department that you have in your company, and if they joined in 2019 and their salary is greater than 90, these are three conditions. We should include them in our program or we should exclude them. It's the same that we wrote right here, but this one is a little bit more tricky because we need to open other functions that you might not have already learned about. We only need 2 out of the 3 logical tests to evaluate to a true. Remember, we did mention that we can always do arithmetic inside our, we can always do arithmetic calculations on our Boolean values, the trues and the false, because Excel understands them as values. So how do we write this one? Any guess so far? Of course, I know you did guess, and if you guessed it right, let us see how we write this one, and then you can evaluate yourself from your side. You'd come here and say equals. We can either use the ifs or the if function, but let us try the if first. I'll say equals if. Let us first test for the department. If this department equals to website, so I open quotes and then close quotes. Because I'm going to do arithmetic, I think let me also open another bracket so that I can use my plus signs. So I'm testing for this first condition, and it might either evaluate to a true or a false. That will mean it's either 1 or a 0. So I'll put a space and then say plus. I'm still within my logical tests, as you can see on the screen tip. So I'll say plus, I open another bracket, and then I test for the year this guy joined. So I need to open the year function, and then select the date serial number and ask, does it equal to 2019? Does it equal to 2019? That's how you ask. Does that date serial number that we are seeing right here equal to 2019? We are trying to speak to this condition. We close off this one, and space plus, we want to work out our last condition, so that at the end of it all, we test among all the 3 conditions that we did test, is this guy meeting any of the 2? That is our goal. So I'll open brackets and say, is this salary value, is the salary value greater than, let us do a little bit of hard coding, greater than 90,000? Is the salary greater than 90,000? I close off this argument as well. So in total, we have three arguments. But remember, we are using the plus sign. Why? Because we want to add up the result that we shall get here. It will either be a 0 if it was a false, or a 1 if it will be a true. So it might either be 0 plus 0 plus 0, and you know the end result. It can either be 1 plus 0 plus 1. So those are two truths, and that guy will have passed, so we should include them. So how do we ask? Yeah, we still within our logical test, we shall say, do all these conditions equal to any of the 2? So this entire thing is our logical test. Now we need to give value if true. So I'll put a comma, and value if true will either be include, which I will lock, or don't include these guys. I can point to exclude, but let me actually say show nothing. I close off the if and hit enter key on the keyboard. So for this guy, we are getting nothing. Why? Let us double check. Let me actually first drag to the rest of the cells and see who are those guys that are getting included and who are those guys that are getting excluded, so that we can evaluate whether we wrote a correct function. So we can check for the first guy. Let us also write something here where we can say department. What I want is to say department and then year join and salary. We want to see how many zeros and ones are they getting. So the first guy is in procurement, also as a department, is not meeting. That means it's getting a 0. And for the year join, if you look at this date, yes, they joined in 2019, because you can see this is October, 6th October 2019. So they get a 1. That is a true. Then for their salary, let me bold this. For their salary, let us check the salary. Is this salary greater than 90,000? We are checking using our eyes. Is it greater than 90,000? Of course not, meaning they get a 0. So when you add up their results, they ended up getting only one true. And this one true that they got is not greater than any 2, because the condition was any 2 out of 3. So let us look at a guy like this one who the function tells us that we should include them in our program. Let us evaluate them manual and see if the function is delivering what we want. So this guy is in website. The department, meaning is getting a 1. When I say 1, it means that is a true. The year they joined, we are looking at this guy. They joined 11th January 2019, meaning they get another 1. Their salary, let us also evaluate their salary. This is 48,950, meaning they get a 0 because it's not greater than 90. They get a 0. So at the end of it all, you can see this guy ended up getting 2 truths. And according to the condition we had, that we are testing this guy, if they get any out of the 3, we should include them. This guy is getting included because they meet this condition. So let us check another one, but I think this one gives us a clear picture of how the function that we just wrote, how it works, how we are able to use arithmetic calculations on these Boolean values, the truths and the false. So are we okay so far to proceed, or we are giving in a lot? People may not really remember what we learned. We could actually end it up from here and find time to come back and handle these logical functions in another free class. I don't know.
Hello?
Let me check. Do we still have?
Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Do we still have guys on?
Still here.
Yes. So
Yes,
what
we
is
are
your
on.
suggestion? Because we've
when
actually come to 8:30.
Okay, when are you going to organize the free class?
We can always discuss in our group.
Okay,
That's
I'm not
something
sure.
that we can always discuss. So our volunteer, can you take us through any concerns? So
Okay, so Chairman, can I talk to you on the side, because there's something that I want to share with you, and it might
no
take
problem.
long. Yeah.
Let us wait when the class ends. So our volunteer, are you still on? If you're not on, then someone else can take it up, or I can handle it myself. If we have any burning issues in the chat, can you please, because I did lose connection, so I'm seeing a few of the concerns.
Hello.
Yes, I'm only seeing a few of the
Yes,
concerns. So
Geoffrey,
if there is,
good evening.
yes, good evening.
Now I think we have covered a lot, and sometimes when we covered a lot like this, we tend to forget where we started from. And with Excel, we need to know how
Practice
to
more.
handle the formulas well.
Yes.
So we need to cover what we can absorb.
Yes,
So I
exactly.
think as a moderator, you can really schedule time, or you say in the platform, maybe you get a day in a week and a time. Then you say on such a day, we'll be having a class on this. Then you just prepare something which everybody will absorb.
Yes, because I believe for this particular class, some people got lost and they had to jump off. I don't know, but I can see someone saying that the speed was too much.
Yeah, it was too
Yes,
much.
Mag is Actually, Maggie, if you are still on, you did say the speed was too much, so you didn't get some of the things.
Even me, I didn't get some. The speed was much.
Oh,
Geoffrey,
but
I
we can
can
always come
assure
back. We
you.
can always come back and handle two things at a go. Maybe we can come back and have 30 minutes for just understanding the formula syntax. Those are things that we can always add. Just that's why we are in this group.
Oh,
So, do we have
okay.
any other person saying something? Man, please
What I
remember to
can
share.
what I can tell you, Geoffrey, is that we mix up.
Hmm.
Yes. I'm saying something.
Yeah, we are
Yes,
working with formulas, and we have new people that are completely
yes,
at zero. So, how do you
that
suggest
is
that we
true.
should handle such? Because now, if you have someone who is at
Um,
zero and someone who is intermediate and an expert on the same class, how how do you?
now we we okay. What we need to do? Somebody who is an expert is also adding on something little. He doesn't know each and everything. So what we need to do is just to prepare something which is enough for everybody. It's not excess to the beginner, it's not too little for the expert.
Oh yes, oh yes. So I think, I think, yeah, that's good advice that we can all take in and try to adjust depending. But if you really want to, of course, we have paid options. If you really want to build you from zero, we can always go in, because in the other classes we don't move like this. The speed is always slow. The participant always share their screens. They also work out examples. We work out one example, we give you a chance, you share your screen and work out the example as well. So in the other class it's a little bit interactive, but in these free sessions we tend to move, the presenter tends to move through things, whereas others are just looking what is happening on the screen. But in the other classes, we do one formula, we work out one example, and then we give you a chance to work out the example yourself. So I believe we have so many options to, if we are really serious in terms of wanting to learn this tool, because this tool is everywhere. This tool is used in all offices, regardless as to whether you're in which profession. You need to know Excel.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'll end the class for all and then stop the recording. Bye.
Okay. So